I'm Sarah, 26 years old, and I never thought my own brother would deliberately sabotage the most important project of my entire career. After spending 3 years building my game development studio from nothing, I was finally about to launch my dream game. Then Marcus asked me for $42,000. When I refused, his revenge was swift and calculated. "Oops, looks like your computer caught a virus," he said with that familiar smirk. Dad immediately jumped to his defense. "These technical things happen, sweetheart." They had no idea what I had planned. If you're enjoying this story, let me know where you're reading from and hit that subscribe button while I tell you exactly how I made my brother face the consequences of destroying 5 years of my life's work. My journey into game development started during my senior year at Portland State University in Oregon. While other computer science students were focused on getting jobs at big tech companies, I was obsessed with creating interactive experiences that could tell meaningful stories. I spent countless nights in the computer lab learning Unity, Unreal Engine, and every programming language I could get my hands on. After graduation, I moved to Austin, Texas, where the indie game scene was thriving. I worked for 2 different gaming companies, learning the business side while developing my skills as a programmer, artist, and storyteller. But my real dream was to create my own studio and develop games that would make a difference in people's lives. 3 years ago, I finally took the plunge. Using my savings and a small business loan, I founded Dreamweaver Interactive in a shared workspace downtown. The name reflected my belief that games could weave dreams into reality, creating experiences that stayed with players long after they turned off their computers. My first commercial project was Echoes of Tomorrow, a narrative-driven adventure game about climate change and hope. The game followed Maya, a young scientist who discovers she can communicate with future versions of Earth, seeing both the catastrophic possibilities and the beautiful worlds that could exist if humanity made different choices. The concept was ambitious, combining environmental storytelling with innovative gameplay mechanics. Players would make decisions in the present that would ripple forward through time, showing them the consequences of their choices through Maya's visions of possible futures. The game tackled serious subjects but wrapped them in an engaging story with memorable characters and stunning hand-painted artwork. I had been working on Echoes of Tomorrow for 2.5 years, pouring every ounce of my creativity, technical skill and passion into the project. The game was scheduled to launch in just 6 weeks, with pre-orders already exceeding my most optimistic projections. Gaming journalists had previewed early builds and were calling it revolutionary and the indie game of the year. Everything was stored on my custom-built development machine in my home office. The computer contained not just the final game files, but 3 years of artwork, thousands of lines of code, character designs, environmental concepts, music compositions, and detailed documentation of every aspect of the game's development. I had been so focused on perfecting the final build that I had fallen behind on my cloud backup schedule, a decision that would soon haunt me. Growing up in suburban Denver, Colorado, I was always the responsible, academically focused child compared to my older brother Marcus, who is 28. Marcus was the charismatic troublemaker who could charm his way out of any situation with our parents. Our mother, Patricia, 54, worked as a nurse and had always been protective of Marcus, believing his struggles were due to learning differences rather than behavioral choices. Our father, David, 56, owned a small auto repair shop and had built his business through hard work and determination. While he respected my academic achievements, he never quite understood my career path. Making video games seemed frivolous to him compared to Marcus's various attempts at real business ventures. The family dynamic had been established early. When Marcus broke my science project in 4th grade, Mom explained that he was just curious and didn't understand how delicate it was. When he borrowed money from my piggy bank in middle school, Dad said I should be more generous with family. When Marcus crashed my car during senior year of high school, causing $3,000 in damage, I was told that accidents happen and I shouldn't be so materialistic about possessions. Marcus's adult life had been a series of failed business ventures and financial crises. He had tried construction, restaurant management, cryptocurrency trading, and most recently starting a dropshipping business selling imported electronics. Each venture began with grandiose promises and requests for family investment and ended with excuses, blame, and appeals for more money to save the failing enterprise. Despite the family dynamics, I had managed to build my own successful path. I graduated college with honors, worked my way up in the gaming industry, and was now on the verge of launching a game that could establish me as a serious indie developer. Gaming industry contacts respected my works, and Echoes of Tomorrow had already attracted attention from major gaming platforms wanting distribution rights. The family crisis that would change everything began when Marcus called me 3 weeks before my game's scheduled launch date. "Sarah, I need to talk to you about something urgent," he said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of manufactured sincerity. I've got an incredible business opportunity, but I need some capital to make it happen. I was in my home office, fine-tuning the final gameplay balance for Echoes of Tomorrow. The last few weeks before launch were always stressful, with countless small details requiring attention. What kind of opportunity? I asked, not looking up from my code editor. There's this amazing investment chance in renewable energy technology, Marcus explained with practiced enthusiasm. A startup company developing next-generation solar panels. They're looking for early investors, and the potential returns are massive. We're talking about getting in on the ground floor of the next Tesla. I had heard similar pitches from Marcus before. Every few months, he discovered a revolutionary investment opportunity that would make him rich if only he could raise enough capital. That sounds interesting, I said diplomatically. Have you done research on the company? Of course, I've been studying this for weeks. The technology is incredible, and they're about to sign contracts with major utility companies, but the investment window closes soon. Here it comes, I thought. The minimum investment is $42,000, Marcus continued. I've got most of it saved up, but I need to borrow the rest to secure my position. This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance, Sarah. The specific amount immediately raised red flags. Not $40,000 or $45,000, but exactly $42,000. In my experience with Marcus, oddly precise financial requests usually meant he was in deeper trouble than he was admitting. Marcus, that's a lot of money, I said carefully. Why not start with a smaller investment? It doesn't work that way, he replied, his enthusiasm becoming more forced. The minimum buy-in is firm. I've already committed to this, Sarah. I told them I could raise the capital. You told them you could get money before you actually had it? I was confident my family would support me, he said, his tone shifting slightly toward manipulation. We've always helped each other out. That was Marcus's version of history. The reality was that our parents had bailed him out of financial problems dozens of times, while I had been financially independent since college graduation. I'm sorry, Marcus, but I can't loan you that amount of money, I said firmly. I've got my game launching soon, and I need to maintain my business cash flow. There was a long pause before Marcus spoke again, his voice noticeably cooler. So that's it? Your own brother comes to you with a legitimate business opportunity, and you just shut me down? It's not personal, Marcus. It's just not something I can do right now. Right. Not something you can do, or not something you want to do. His voice was becoming hostile. You've got your successful little business, your fancy computer setup, your game that's going to make you rich and famous. But when your family needs help, suddenly you're too busy. Marcus, my business isn't a hobby. It's my career, and launching this game represents years of work and financial investment. Must be nice to be so successful that you can ignore your family, he said bitterly. I'm not ignoring anyone. I'm just not in a position to loan you $42,000. Marcus hung up without saying goodbye, leaving me staring at my phone and feeling the familiar tension that came from family interactions. But I pushed the conversation out of my mind and returned to work. I had a game to finish, and nothing was going to distract me from that goal. What I didn't know was that Marcus's investment opportunity was entirely fictional, created to cover up gambling debts that had spiraled out of control. His cryptocurrency trading had actually been crypto gambling, and he owed money to several online casinos, and at least one loan shark who was becoming increasingly insistent about repayment. 2 days later, Mom called to invite me home for the weekend. Your father wants to see you before your big game launch, she said. He's been bragging to all his customers about having a daughter in the video game business. I was touched by Dad's pride, even if he didn't fully understand what I did. I decided to make the drive home to Denver, bringing my laptop so I could continue working on final optimizations during downtime. The family dinner on Saturday night felt tense from the beginning. Marcus was unusually quiet, avoiding eye contact and checking his phone constantly under the table. When Mom asked about his solar panel investment, he gave vague answers about waiting for contracts to be finalized. How's the game coming along? Dad asked me, genuinely interested. Really well, I replied. We're launching in 4 weeks and the early reviews have been incredible. Gaming magazines are calling it revolutionary. That's wonderful, sweetheart, Mom said. You've worked so hard on this. Marcus looked up from his phone with barely concealed irritation. Must be nice to have such a stress-free career, playing around with computers all day, making games for kids. It's not playing around, Dad said, defending me for once. Sarah's built a real business. She's got employees, contracts, responsibilities. Right, Marcus muttered. Sorry, I forgot we're all supposed to be impressed by the video game genius. The undercurrent of resentment was obvious, but I tried to keep the peace. Marcus, how's your business going? Any new developments? Oh, you care now? He said with a humorless laugh. I thought you were too busy with your precious game to worry about family. Mom looked confused. What are you talking about? I asked Sarah for help with a business investment, Marcus explained, his voice taking on a martyred tone. Nothing major, just a short-term loan. But apparently I'm not worth her time. Marcus asked me to loan him $42,000, I clarified. That's not exactly nothing major. Dad's eyebrows rose. That's a lot of money, son. It's an investment opportunity, Marcus insisted. The returns would be enormous, but Sarah couldn't be bothered to help her own brother. I explained that I couldn't afford to loan that amount right now, I said. My business needs cash flow stability, especially during a product launch. Mom nodded understandingly. That makes sense, honey. Business loans are serious commitments. Marcus's face flushed with anger. Of course you take her side. Perfect Sarah can do no wrong. Nobody's taking sides, Dad said firmly. We're just being realistic about money. Marcus pushed back from the table. Whatever. I guess I know where I stand in this family. He stormed out of the dining room, leaving an uncomfortable silence behind. He's been under a lot of stress lately, Mom said apologetically. The business ventures haven't been going well. Maybe that's because he keeps jumping from one get-rich-quick scheme to another, I said, immediately regretting the words. Sarah, Mom said gently, he's your brother. I know, but that doesn't mean I have to fund every business idea he has. Dad nodded slowly. You're right to be careful with your money. Marcus needs to learn to stand on his own. Sunday morning, I was in the guest bedroom working on my laptop when Marcus appeared in the doorway. He looked like he had slept poorly, his hair disheveled and his eyes bloodshot. Hey, he said, his voice unnaturally casual. What are you working on? Final bug fixes for the game, I replied, not looking up from the screen, trying to optimize the loading times for the forest level. Cool. Mind if I take a look? I was surprised by his sudden interest, but I gestured for him to come closer. Sure, this is the main menu screen, and here's one of the gameplay areas. Marcus peered over my shoulder as I navigated through different sections of the game. Wow, this actually looks pretty professional. How long did this take you to make? About 2.5 years for the full development cycle, I said, pleased by his apparent interest. But I've been planning and conceptualizing it for even longer, and all of this is on your laptop. The master files. Yes, I have backup systems, but this machine has the most current version of everything. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. That's a lot of work to have in one place. I'm usually better about backups, I admitted, but I've been so focused on perfecting the final build that I've gotten behind on my usual routine. Makes sense. You want to get it perfect before launch. His interest seemed genuine, so I showed him more features of the game, the environmental storytelling mechanics, the time travel elements, the branching narrative paths that responded to player choices. This is actually really cool, Marcus said. I had no idea games could be this complex. For a moment, I felt hopeful that maybe we could bridge the gap that had opened between us. Maybe Marcus was finally understanding that my work was serious and meaningful. I'm going to grab some coffee, he said after a few minutes. Want anything? Coffee sounds great, I said, focused on adjusting some lighting parameters in the forest scene. Marcus left and returned a few minutes later with 2 steaming mugs. Here you go, he said, setting mine down next to the laptop. Thanks, I said, reaching for the coffee while continuing to work. As I lifted the mug, Marcus suddenly lurched forward as if he had tripped. The movement seemed clumsy and unintentional, but his elbow caught my coffee mug and sent the hot liquid splashing directly onto my laptop keyboard. Oh shit! Marcus exclaimed, jumping back. I'm so sorry! I totally lost my balance! I watched in horror as coffee seeped into the keyboard and began pooling around the laptop's base. The screen flickered once, twice, then went completely black. No, no, no! I whispered, frantically pressing the power button. Nothing happened. Sarah, I am so sorry, Marcus said, his voice filled with what sounded like genuine distress. It was a complete accident. I just stumbled and knocked into you. But something about his reaction felt wrong. The stumble had seemed too convenient, too perfectly timed to cause maximum damage. And there was something in his eyes, a flash of satisfaction that he quickly tried to hide. Marcus, I said quietly, what did you just do? It was an accident, he insisted. I feel terrible about this. Mom and Dad rushed into the room, drawn by the commotion. What happened? Mom asked, seeing me holding my dripping laptop. Marcus spilled coffee on my computer, I said, my voice eerily calm despite the rage building inside me. Oh, honey, these things happen, Mom said immediately, putting her arm around Marcus. It was just an accident. Was it? I asked, looking directly at Marcus. His face flushed, but he maintained his innocent expression. Of course it was. Why would I deliberately damage your computer? Because I wouldn't loan you $42,000, I said. That's ridiculous, Dad said. Marcus wouldn't do something like that over money. But I could see the doubt creeping into Dad's eyes. He knew Marcus's history with money and revenge. I need to see if I can save any of the data, I said, standing up with my ruined laptop. We'll buy you a new computer, Dad offered. Whatever you need. A new computer won't bring back 3 years of work, I replied. In the guest bedroom, I carefully examined my laptop. The coffee damage was extensive, having penetrated not just the keyboard, but also the internal components. The machine was completely dead, and even professional data recovery would be unlikely to salvage anything useful. I sat on the bed, finally allowing the full impact to hit me. My game was gone. 3 years of development, thousands of hours of programming, artwork that had taken months to create, music compositions, level designs, character models. Everything was destroyed. But more than that, my business was ruined. I had contracts with publishers expecting the game in 4 weeks. I had pre-orders from customers who had paid for a product I could no longer deliver. I had employees whose jobs depended on the success of this launch. Marcus had destroyed not just my laptop, but my entire career. As the initial shock wore off, it was replaced by a cold, calculating anger unlike anything I had ever felt. Marcus had finally gone too far, and this time there would be consequences he couldn't charm his way out of. I opened my phone and began making calls. First, I contacted my insurance company to report the laptop damage. While filing the claim, I mentioned that the incident occurred immediately after a family member had requested a large loan and been refused. That does sound suspicious, the claims adjuster said. We'll want to investigate this thoroughly. Next, I called my business lawyer explaining the situation and its potential impact on my company's contractual obligations. Sarah, this is potentially criminal, she said. If you can prove it was intentional, we're looking at charges for destruction of property, computer tampering, and possibly commercial sabotage. The business damages alone could be in the hundreds of thousands. Then I made the most important call to my business partner and lead programmer, Jake, who lived in Austin. Sarah, please tell me you're joking, Jake said after I explained what had happened. I wish I was. The master build is gone, along with all the recent updates. What about the cloud backups? 3 weeks old. We'd lose most of the final optimization work, the new character animations, and the entire audio integration for the last 2 levels. Jake was quiet for a moment. That's recoverable, but it would push our launch date back by at least 3 months. We'd have to break our publishing contracts and refund the pre-orders. I know, but there might be another option. I explained my suspicion that Marcus had deliberately destroyed the laptop. If I can prove it was intentional, we can pursue criminal charges and civil damages. The insurance payout plus restitution might cover our losses while we rebuild. What do you need from me? Jake asked immediately. Document everything from our end. Timeline of development, business impact calculations, contract obligations. I'm going to need comprehensive proof of what was destroyed and what it costs to replace. While Jake worked on the business documentation, I began my investigation into Marcus's real financial situation. Using public records and social media analysis, I discovered that Marcus's dropshipping business had failed months ago. His social media posts showed expensive purchases and lifestyle choices that didn't match someone struggling financially, but deeper investigation revealed they were all bought on credit. I called my cousin Lisa, who worked in banking, and asked her to help me understand Marcus's recent financial activities. Sarah, I can't give you specific information about his accounts, she said, but I can tell you that someone with his credit profile and recent activity would be having serious problems getting legitimate loans. That confirmed my suspicion that Marcus's investment opportunity was fictional, created to cover up debts he couldn't pay through normal channels. I also discovered that Marcus had been researching my business online, including news articles about my upcoming game launch and estimates of my company's value. He had clearly been planning something for weeks. The smoking gun came when I checked the security camera footage from my parents' house. Dad had installed a basic system the previous year after a break-in in their neighborhood. The footage clearly showed Marcus in the kitchen before bringing me coffee, standing at the counter for several minutes with his back to the camera. But more importantly, it showed his approach to my laptop. The stumble that had seemed so accidental was clearly deliberate. Marcus had intentionally knocked into me to spill the coffee on my computer. With the evidence gathered, I implemented my plan. First, I filed a police report for criminal mischief and destruction of property. The investigating officer took the report seriously, especially when I showed him the security footage and explained the financial motive. Ma'am, this appears to be premeditated destruction of property, Officer Rodriguez said. Given the value of what was destroyed and the business impact, this could be a felony charge. Next, I contacted the district attorney's office about potential charges related to commercial sabotage and interference with business operations. Then I made the most difficult call to my parents. Mom, I need to tell you something about what really happened with my laptop. Sarah, please don't make a big deal about the coffee spill. Marcus feels terrible. It wasn't an accident, Mom. I have security camera footage that proves Marcus deliberately destroyed my computer. There was silence on the line. That's impossible, Mom finally said. Marcus would never do something like that. I'm sending you the video footage right now. You can see for yourself. I texted her the relevant clips from the security system. Mom, there's more. Marcus has been lying about his business situation. He's not investing in solar panels. He's in serious debt, probably from gambling, and he needed that $42,000 to pay off what he owes. Another long silence. "I'll call you back," Mom said, her voice shaky. Within an hour, my phone rang. It was Dad. "Sarah, your mother and I just watched the footage. We also did some digging into Marcus's finances." His voice was heavy with disappointment. "You're right. The business opportunity was fake, and he's been lying to us about his situation for months. Dad, this isn't just about lying. He destroyed 3 years of my work and potentially ruined my business because I wouldn't give him money." "I know, and there are going to be consequences this time." That afternoon, my parents confronted Marcus in their living room. I participated via video call from my hotel room in Denver. "Marcus, we need to discuss what happened with Sarah's computer," Dad began, his voice stern in a way I rarely heard. Marcus immediately went on the defensive. "I already apologized for the accident. I feel bad enough about it." "It wasn't an accident," Mom said, her voice breaking slightly. "We've seen the security camera footage. For the first time in my life, I watched Marcus's confident facade completely crumble. I can explain," he stammered. "Explain what?" Dad asked. "Explain why you deliberately destroyed your sister's work. Explain why you lied about the solar panel investment. Explain why you've been hiding thousands of dollars in debt." Marcus looked around the room like a trapped animal, his usual charm completely useless in the face of undeniable evidence. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," he finally said. "I owe money to people who don't accept excuses. I needed that loan to keep them from what?" Dad interrupted. "What kind of trouble are you in?" "Gambling debts," Marcus admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "It started with cryptocurrency trading, but then I got into online casinos trying to win back what I lost. I owe about $60,000 to various places." Mom gasped. $60,000? "That's why I needed the loan from Sarah. I figured if her stupid game was going to make her rich anyway, she could afford to help family." "So you destroyed it?" I asked through the video call. "You destroyed 3 years of my work because you thought I didn't deserve success?" Marcus turned to look at the camera, and for a moment I saw pure hatred in his eyes. "You've always had everything handed to you," he said. "Perfect grades, perfect college experience, perfect career. Do you know what it's like being the family failure while your little sister gets praised for playing video games?" "I worked for everything I have," I replied. "No one handed me anything." "Right. Keep telling yourself that." Dad stood up, his face flushed with anger. "Marcus, you need to leave this house right now." "Dad, get out. Don't come back until you're ready to take responsibility for what you've done and make it right." As Marcus gathered his things, he turned to me one last time. "I hope you're happy," he said. "You've turned our parents against me over a stupid computer." "I didn't turn anyone against you," I replied. "You did that yourself when you decided to destroy my career out of jealousy." After Marcus left, the house fell into heavy silence. Mom was crying, and Dad looked like he had aged 10 years in the span of an hour. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," Dad said. "We enabled this behavior for too long. We should have seen what he was becoming." "We all made mistakes," I said, "but now we need to focus on making sure he faces consequences for his actions." The legal proceedings moved quickly. With clear video evidence and documented financial motive, the district attorney filed multiple charges against Marcus: criminal mischief in the first degree, computer tampering, and interference with business operations. Marcus's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, arguing that it was a family dispute that had gotten out of hand. But the prosecutor, after learning about the extensive business damages, insisted on serious consequences. "Mr. Thompson destroyed a small business owner's livelihood out of spite," the prosecutor told the judge during the plea hearing. This wasn't a moment of anger. It was premeditated sabotage that cost his sister her career and her employees their jobs. In the end, Marcus pleaded guilty to all charges. He was sentenced to 18 months in county jail, 3 years of probation, and ordered to pay full restitution for the business damages, a total of $385,000, covering lost revenue, contract penalties, employee severances, and business recovery costs. The insurance payout helped, but rebuilding the game from 3-week-old backups was a monumental task. Jake and I worked 18-hour days for 2 months, recreating lost work and implementing improvements. We had to push the launch date back by 4 months, but when Echoes of Tomorrow finally released, it was even better than the original version would have been. The game was a massive success, earning critical acclaim and commercial success beyond my wildest dreams. Gaming magazines called it a masterpiece of environmental storytelling and the indie game that proves video games are art. More importantly, the publicity around the game's development story, how it was nearly destroyed by family sabotage but rebuilt stronger than ever, attracted attention from major gaming studios and investors. Dreamweaver Interactive went from a one-person operation to a full studio with 12 employees within 6 months of launch. The family dynamics shifted permanently after Marcus's conviction. Some relatives initially accused me of being vindictive, but as the full extent of Marcus's lies and manipulation came to light, most family members came to understand that consequences had been long overdue. We enabled him for 30 years. Dad reflected during one of our weekly phone calls. Every time we bailed him out, every time we made excuses, we taught him that he could hurt people without facing real consequences. Mom struggled more with guilt and conflicted emotions. I keep thinking about all the times I should have said something, she told me, all the times I chose peace over accountability. You were trying to be a loving mother, I reassured her. But sometimes love means letting people face the results of their choices. Marcus served 14 months of his sentence and was released early for good behavior. He moved to Phoenix to live with our uncle and work in construction, away from the family dynamics that had enabled his destructive patterns. For the first year after his release, I had no contact with Marcus. My parents visited him occasionally, but respected my decision to maintain distance while I focused on rebuilding my business and processing the trauma of what had happened. Then, 2 years after the laptop incident, I received a letter from Marcus. It was handwritten and much different from his usual dramatic communications. Sarah, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted to tell you that I'm getting help. Real help this time, not just court-ordered counseling. I'm working with a therapist who specializes in gambling addiction and family dynamics. I'm also attending Gamblers Anonymous and working with a financial counselor to address my debts honestly. I know I can't undo what I did to your career and your dreams. I destroyed something irreplaceable because I was jealous and desperate. I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not asking for money or favors. I just wanted you to know that I'm finally taking responsibility for my actions. I hope your game was successful and that your business is thriving. You deserve all the success in the world. Marcus. I kept the letter for several weeks before responding. When I finally wrote back, I kept it simple. Marcus, I'm glad you're getting help. Recovery is hard work, but change is possible if you stay committed to it. I'm not ready for a relationship yet, but I appreciate your honesty about what happened. Focus on your healing. Sarah. The success of Echoes of Tomorrow led to opportunities I had never imagined. The game won several indie game awards, was featured in museum exhibitions about interactive art, and sparked discussions about video games as tools for environmental education. I was invited to speak at gaming conferences around the world, sharing the story of how the game was nearly lost and rebuilt, stronger than ever. The narrative of overcoming sabotage and family betrayal resonated with many people who had faced similar challenges. Echoes of Tomorrow also opened doors for bigger projects. Major publishers approached me about developing larger games with bigger budgets, and I eventually signed a deal to create a trilogy of games exploring environmental themes. 3 years after the laptop incident, Dreamweaver Interactive had grown into a respected indie studio with 25 employees and multiple projects in development. We had moved into a larger office space and were working on games that would reach millions of players worldwide. My relationship with my parents evolved into something healthier and more honest. They had learned to set boundaries with Marcus and were proud of what I had accomplished, despite the obstacles. You know, Dad said during one visit to my new office, I used to worry that making video games wasn't a real career. But watching what you've built, seeing how your work affects people, I was wrong. This is more real than anything I ever imagined. Mom agreed, adding, I'm proud of how you handled everything with Marcus. You could have just let it go like we always did, but you insisted on accountability. That was the right thing to do, even though it was hard. The gaming industry also took notice of the story behind Echoes of Tomorrow. Several articles were written about indie developers overcoming personal and professional obstacles, and my experience became a case study in business schools about crisis management and family boundary setting. 4 years later, when Marcus completed his probation and addiction treatment, he sent another letter asking if we could have a conversation. This time, I agreed to a phone call. The conversation was awkward, but genuine. Marcus talked about his recovery journey, his work in construction, and his efforts to make amends to people he had hurt over the years. I've been thinking a lot about that day, he said. Not just what I did to your laptop, but why I did it. I was so consumed by jealousy and entitlement that I convinced myself you didn't deserve success. And now? I asked. Now I understand that success isn't something you deserve or don't deserve. It's something you create through hard work and good choices. I spent so many years making bad choices and expecting other people to fix the consequences. We didn't become close friends overnight, but we began having occasional conversations. Marcus was careful not to overshare or make dramatic proclamations about his transformation. Instead, he consistently demonstrated change through his actions. 5 years after the laptop incident, I was invited to keynote the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco. My talk was titled, Rebuilding from Ashes, How Personal Crisis Can Fuel Creative Innovation. During the presentation, I shared the story of how Echoes of Tomorrow was nearly destroyed and how that crisis ultimately led to better systems, stronger relationships, and more meaningful work. Sometimes, the most destructive moments in our lives become the foundation for our greatest growth, I told the audience of game developers. When someone tries to destroy your dreams, you have a choice. You can let that destruction define you, or you can use it as fuel to build something even stronger. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of developers shared their own stories of overcoming personal and professional sabotage, and many credited my story with helping them set boundaries in their own lives. After the conference, I received an email that surprised me. It was from Marcus. "Sarah, I watched your keynote online. I'm proud of what you've accomplished, and I'm grateful that you were able to turn my worst moment into something positive. Thank you for not letting my actions destroy your dreams permanently, Marcus." Looking back, I realized that Marcus's attack on my laptop, while devastating at the time, had forced me to develop resilience and systems that made my business stronger. I implemented better backup procedures, diversified my revenue streams, and built a team that could handle crises. More importantly, I learned that protecting yourself from destructive people, even family members, isn't selfish, but necessary for survival and growth. Setting boundaries and insisting on consequences doesn't make you the villain. It makes you responsible for your own well-being. The gaming industry recognized this story as more than just personal drama. Echoes of Tomorrow became a symbol of creative resilience, and my studio became known for supporting developers who faced personal challenges while pursuing their artistic visions. 6 years later, Dreamweaver Interactive had released multiple successful games and established a scholarship program for aspiring game developers from difficult family situations. We also partnered with addiction recovery organizations to create educational games about healthy decision-making and financial responsibility. Marcus and I never became close siblings, but we developed a respectful relationship based on honesty rather than family obligation. He continued his recovery work and eventually started his own small construction company, focusing on sustainable building practices. During our last conversation, Marcus reflected on the laptop incident from a perspective I hadn't expected. "You know what's weird?" he said. "I spent so many years hating you for being successful, but destroying your laptop actually made you more successful in the long run. The publicity, the story of overcoming sabotage, the systems you built afterward, it all made your career stronger." "That wasn't your intention," I pointed out. "No, it wasn't. I was trying to hurt you out of jealousy and desperation, but the fact that you turned my destruction into something positive, that says everything about who you are versus who I was back then." The conversation helped me understand that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting or pretending that destructive actions didn't have consequences. It means acknowledging that people can change while still protecting yourself from future harm. 7 years after the laptop incident, I was featured on the cover of Game Developer magazine as Indie Developer of the Year. The article detailed my journey from a solo developer working in a shared office space to running a studio that had influenced environmental education through gaming. Echoes of Tomorrow had spawned a trilogy that reached over 10 million players worldwide. The games were used in schools to teach about climate science, in therapy programs to help people process environmental anxiety, and in corporate training to promote sustainable business practices. But the most meaningful recognition came from the players themselves. I received thousands of emails from people who said the games had changed their perspective on environmental issues, inspired them to pursue careers in sustainability, or helped them through difficult periods in their lives. One email particularly stood out from a teenager in Colorado whose family was struggling with addiction issues. "Dear Sarah, I played Echoes of Tomorrow during the worst period of my life, when my older brother was destroying our family with his gambling addiction. Your game showed me that even when people try to destroy your future, you can rebuild it stronger than before. I'm now studying game design in college and hope to create games that help people the way yours helped me. Thank you for not giving up when your brother tried to destroy your dreams." Reading that email, I realized that Marcus's attempt to sabotage my career had ultimately created a ripple effect of positive change that extended far beyond my personal situation. The story of overcoming family betrayal had resonated with people facing similar challenges, and the games I created as a result had touched millions of lives. The gaming industry continued to evolve, and Dreamweaver Interactive evolved with it. We expanded into virtual reality experiences, educational partnerships, and international collaborations. The company that had almost died with a coffee-soaked laptop now employed over 50 people and had offices in 3 cities. During our annual company meeting, I often told new employees about the laptop incident and its aftermath. Not as a sob story, but as a lesson about resilience and the importance of building systems that can survive personal crises. Your work will face threats from unexpected directions. I would tell them, Sometimes those threats will come from people you trust, but if you build your career on solid foundations, good relationships, ethical practices, and genuine value creation, you can survive almost anything. The relationship with my parents continued to strengthen as we all learned healthier communication patterns. They became genuine supporters of my work, attending game launch events and proudly sharing my achievements with their friends. Dad, who had once viewed game development as frivolous, became one of my biggest advocates. "I tell everyone who comes into the shop about my daughter's games," he said proudly. "You've shown me that entertainment can be education, that play can be profound." Mom, who had struggled with guilt about enabling Marcus for so many years, found peace in seeing both of her children find healthier paths. "I used to think love meant protecting people from consequences," she reflected. "Now I understand that real love means supporting people in facing those consequences and growing from them." 8 years after the laptop incident, I was invited to give the commencement address at Portland State University, my alma mater. The speech was titled, "When Family Becomes the Obstacle, Building Success Despite Sabotage." In the address, I shared the complete story of how my brother's jealousy nearly destroyed my career and how that destruction ultimately led to greater success and impact. "Some of you will face opposition from unexpected sources," I told the graduating class. "Sometimes the people who should support your dreams will be the ones trying to destroy them. When that happens, you have a choice. You can enable their destructive behavior to maintain false peace, or you can stand up for your dreams and insist on accountability." The response was overwhelming. Many students approached me afterward to share their own stories of family members who had sabotaged their education or career plans out of jealousy or control. One student, a computer science major named Alex, told me, "My father deleted my entire senior project the night before it was due because he wanted me to study business instead of programming. I've been feeling guilty about being angry with him, but your story helped me realize that protecting my work and my future isn't selfish." These conversations reinforced my belief that sharing difficult family stories can help others recognize and address similar patterns in their own lives. Marcus, who had rebuilt his life slowly and deliberately, eventually started his own small construction company specializing in eco-friendly building practices. The irony wasn't lost on either of us that he had found success in sustainable construction, while I had found success in games about environmental consciousness. "Maybe we were always meant to work toward the same goals," he said during one of our annual check-in calls. "We just took very different paths to get there." Our relationship remained cautious but genuine. We exchanged holiday cards, occasionally talked on the phone, and had developed a mutual respect based on honesty rather than family obligation. "I'm never going to ask you for money again," Marcus told me directly during one conversation. "Not because you wouldn't help, but because I never want to put either of us in that position again. I've learned to build a life that doesn't depend on other people's generosity." This commitment to financial independence was one of the most meaningful changes in Marcus's behavior. For the first time in his adult life, he was supporting himself without family assistance and making financial decisions based on his actual resources rather than hoped-for bailouts. 9 years after the laptop incident, Echoes of Tomorrow was selected for permanent exhibition at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History as part of a collection on digital art that changed society. The recognition placed my work alongside historically significant artifacts, acknowledging video games as legitimate art forms with cultural impact. The exhibition included not just the game itself, but the story behind its creation, including the near destruction and rebuilding process. A display case contained fragments of the original coffee-damaged laptop, alongside documentation of the legal proceedings and recovery efforts. Standing in the Smithsonian, looking at my destroyed laptop in a museum display case, I felt a profound sense of completion. The object that had once represented devastating loss had become a symbol of resilience and transformation. Mom and Dad attended the exhibition opening, their pride evident as they watched visitors engage with my work. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Marcus hadn't destroyed the laptop?" Mom asked as we stood before the display. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But I think everything happened the way it needed to. The original version of the game was good, but the rebuilt version was better. More importantly, the experience taught me lessons about resilience and boundary setting that have served me well in everything since." Dad nodded thoughtfully. "Marcus's worst moment became the foundation for your greatest success. There's something poetic about that." The 10th anniversary of the laptop incident coincided with the launch of my latest game, Second Chances, which explored themes of redemption, accountability, and family healing. The game was inspired by my experiences with Marcus and countless stories I had heard from players who faced similar family challenges. Unlike my previous games, Second Chances dealt explicitly with difficult family relationships, offering players opportunities to navigate complex scenarios involving addiction, financial manipulation, and emotional abuse. The game provided resources for real-world support services and emphasized that forgiveness doesn't require continued exposure to destructive behavior. The launch event for Second Chances included a panel discussion on family dynamics and creative careers. Surprisingly, Marcus asked to participate, sharing his perspective on how addiction and jealousy had led him to sabotage someone he loved. "I spent years believing that Sarah's success somehow diminished my worth," he told the audience. "Recovery taught me that other people's achievements don't take anything away from me. They can actually inspire me to do better if I let them." His participation in the panel represented a level of public accountability that would have been unthinkable 10 years earlier. Marcus had evolved from someone who made excuses and blamed others to someone who took responsibility and helped others learn from his mistakes. The gaming industry had also evolved during this time, with increasing recognition of video games as tools for social change and education. Dreamweaver Interactive became a leader in what was called impact gaming, creating entertainment that also addressed serious social issues. Our games were used in addiction recovery programs, family therapy sessions, and educational settings around the world. The studio had partnerships with non-profits, universities, and healthcare organizations, creating custom gaming experiences for specific therapeutic and educational needs. Looking back over the decades since the laptop incident, I realized that Marcus's attempt to destroy my career had ultimately led to work that had greater meaning and impact than I had ever imagined possible. The games I created in response to that crisis had touched millions of lives and contributed to important conversations about environmental responsibility, family accountability, and personal resilience. The destruction of my laptop had forced me to rebuild not just my work, but my entire approach to business, relationships, and creative expression. The systems I developed to prevent future sabotage had made my company stronger and more sustainable. The boundary-setting skills I learned in dealing with Marcus had improved all of my relationships. Most importantly, I had learned that protecting your dreams from destructive people, even family members, isn't selfish, but necessary for creating work that can help others. By refusing to enable Marcus's destructive behavior and insisting on consequences, I had not only protected my own future, but potentially helped him find a path to genuine recovery and growth. The story that began with a deliberately spilled cup of coffee had become a case study in resilience, a source of inspiration for struggling creators, and proof that even the most devastating betrayals can become foundations for greater success. As I write this, 11 years after the laptop incident, Dreamweaver Interactive continues to grow and evolve. We're working on projects that would have been impossible to imagine when I was a solo developer working in a shared office space. The company culture emphasizes support for creators facing personal challenges, and we've helped numerous developers overcome family opposition, financial difficulties, and other obstacles to their creative work. Marcus and I maintain our respectful relationship, built on honesty rather than obligation. He continues his recovery work and has become an advocate for gambling addiction awareness. We're not close siblings in the traditional sense, but we've found a way to coexist that honors both our individual growth and our shared family history. Our parents, now in their late 60s, have become genuine supporters of both their children's paths. They learned from their mistakes in enabling destructive behavior and have developed healthier relationships based on accountability rather than false peacekeeping. The laptop that Marcus destroyed 11 years ago has been replaced dozens of times, but the lessons from that experience continue to influence every aspect of my work and life. I've learned that success isn't just about creating good work, it's about building systems and relationships that can protect that work from those who would destroy it out of jealousy, desperation, or spite. The gaming industry recognizes Dreamweaver Interactive as a studio that proves entertainment can be meaningful, that business can be ethical, and that success can survive even the most personal betrayals. The work that nearly ended with a coffee spill has become a legacy that will outlast any individual crisis or conflict. For anyone reading this who has faced similar family sabotage or opposition, I want you to know that recovery is possible, success is achievable, and protecting yourself from destructive people is not only acceptable, but necessary. Your dreams are worth defending, even from those who should be supporting them. The story of the destroyed laptop has become more than just a personal anecdote. It's become a reminder that our worst moments can become the foundation for our greatest achievements if we refuse to let destruction have the final word. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to let them face the consequences of their destructive actions. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to build a life strong enough to survive their attempts to tear it down. What about you? Have you ever had to choose between family peace and protecting your dreams? How did you handle relatives who tried to sabotage your success? Share your story in the comments below, and remember, you're not alone in facing these challenges. If this story resonated with you, please upvote and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to protect your work and your future, even from family members. Real family supports your growth. They don't try to destroy it. Thank you for reading my story, and remember, your dreams are worth defending, your boundaries are worth maintaining, and your success is worth protecting from anyone who would try to destroy it out of jealousy or spite.